Welcome to Stay Humble podcast, Joe Kent. How are you feeling today?
If I'm really honest, David, it's thank goodness it's Friday. The sun's out, it's beautiful, so I'm ready to enjoy the weekend.
I don't blame you, and I'll let you get back to enjoy that shortly. And we've obviously been trying to arrange this podcast for a number of months, and I understand it's been a very difficult time at the moment. During the last sort of 12 months has been difficult in terms of lockdowns and people obviously with furloughs and the COVID situation. I can't imagine how difficult the last few weeks has been for yourself in your role as a suicide prevention lead in the Humber Coast and Vale Health Care Partnership.
It's been challenging, and we've sort of been working frantically behind the scenes to try and put things in place and to kind of point people in the direction for different services. So it has been really busy, and as you've rightly said, it's amongst everything else that's going on in terms of COVID, and people sort of, everybody's got a different reaction, haven't they, for us being released, if you like, and everybody feels differently about it. And I think for some people there's a real panic. For other people, they just can't wait to have something near a normality. So I think there's lots of things going on for different people, more than we've ever seen before. And it's really out there, isn't it? And everybody's kind of expressing how they're feeling a lot more as well.
Yeah, and obviously touching on recent news and stuff of a local newspaper sharing information regarding a number of suicides in the local area. But the biggest concern to me when I looked at this article that was posted was the fact there was no support lines, no websites for support with people that might have been at the time suffering with depression or anxiety or anything, feeling them maybe thoughts. There was nothing there to help, and I wondered what your thoughts were in terms of not providing that information.
Of course, that's not the right thing to do, and there is Samaritans guidance for the media, and most channels that are going to be putting those kind of stories out there are aware of those guidelines, and repeatedly get sent them. So it should always be there at the end of a story, to provide that extra support to people, like you say, that may be feeling vulnerable and find the stories difficult to read. They should then be able to follow up with that and be able to ring the likes of the Samaritans for some support and help.
I agree, definitely. And I know I'm hearing from another podcast recently where they said, because obviously them helplines haven't paid for the advertising, that's why the paper maybe wouldn't have gone ahead with that. I mean, that's just an opinion of someone, but I guess it's just wrong that there's not using that as an opportunity there to support others at this difficult time would be much more appropriate, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. And I think, then we just need to keep reminding the media that it is their responsibility, and that they need to work within the Samaritans media guidelines to keep everybody as safe as we possibly can do.
Yeah, and I know yourself haven't seen this, but obviously there's a programme that's just aired on national TV called The Syndicate, and one of the scenes they've used the local area to fake a death, which personally upset me at the time, and everything like that was just totally wrong. And I've gone to the extent of complaining and telling them about how I felt it sort of affects people's friends and families and stuff like that who may have dealt with suicide, which I thought was totally insensitive, and the way it was portrayed was very jovial, which I'm not happy about. And I shared that. And in terms of what was fed back to me in the email, it basically said that it is, however, ultimately within our editorial guidance to uphold the right of a programme makers to implement elements of dramatic license in order to tell interesting, compelling fictional stories. What are your thoughts on that?
I just think, as you said, it is just so insensitive, isn't it? I haven't actually seen it. I did get informed about it, but to be honest, I couldn't cope with watching it at the time because there was so much else going on. It wasn't something that I've actually sat down and watched. But it just feels sometimes, doesn't it, that sometimes the media will do anything for a click. and to get their rates up. And that doesn't sit morally right for individuals, does it? So I think, I've got to sort of commend you in the fact that you've actually gone there and you put yourself out there and you wrote to, did you say it was the BBC?
It was on the BBC as well.
Yeah, that you've actually wrote to them expressing your concern and your worries around that. So, that's really well done to you for actually doing that. But it's poor reporting and insensitive, isn't it? At a time where people are really affected and impacted. In terms of mental health, we know that there's been an increase in people coming forward to services during COVID. So it just feels really insensitive.
Yeah, like I say, our mutual friend was down near the Humber Rescue at the time of recording and stuff like that, and obviously knew there was TV crews down there, but there was no knowledge of what they were actually recording or what they were trying to portray. So obviously, for people like him, for them and that to hear that's what they were actually delivering was quite insensitive to the nature of their job in terms of what they put up with on a daily basis. I think it was really just ill taste and not. I would not see that as entertainment.
Absolutely not. And, sort of thinking about the points that you've just made, wouldn't it have been wonderful if they'd have actually talked to Humber Rescue about what they were filming, and Humber Rescue said, would you like to come around and just follow us for a day and see what that feels like? And perhaps we might have had a different outcome.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it would have given a different viewpoint as well to see what they'd see on a day to day, or just know what they have to deal with. It's like I say, I'd hope that more people obviously did the same thing as me in terms of complaining, and hopefully like it would maybe address like the seriousness of what is going on at the moment. And obviously it links into sort of the difficult 12 months of COVID and stuff like that. I mean, it's not just the only sort of element of concern that I've got. I don't know if you're aware of sort of this. I looked up the stats recently about alcohol poisoning in the country, and alcohol poisoning deaths was the highest reported since the stats came out in 2001. I know obviously it pretty much can link to the fact, I mean, that's not just a regional, that is a national thing. And obviously that's kind of linked to lockdown and COVID and stuff like that. So that's quite a concerning thing for me as well in terms of, prevention of things, in terms of if people are turning to alcohol and stuff, in terms of like alcohol abuse or poisoning, it's quite a sad fact, unfortunately, that's happened in the last year.
Yeah, and I guess when we think back, although it feels such a long time ago now, doesn't it, David, since we first started in lockdown, but I guess when we think back to it, I suppose for, especially in our region, we didn't have many cases where people were dying of COVID, thank goodness, at that time. And the weather was beautiful. A lot of people were furloughed and they were doing jobs in the garden. And the good weather, as always, encourages us to maybe start a little bit earlier than we normally would on the alcohol. Yeah. But definitely it has been a real concern that the alcohol intake has increased. And I think, some people have really monitored what they drink and they've really pulled back from drinking, but there's others who use that as a way of coping. And when you're sort of locked in your house under these kind of pressures constantly, it's really difficult. And I think, that probably business owners and stuff have a duty of to be able to be mindful of that and to be observant of their employees. And I know that there are some groups out there that support and train businesses in terms of looking at signs and symptoms and how to support staff, because again, if somebody's got an alcohol related issue, it could mean that they're then taking time off sick from work, which again all adds to the business owner and their outgoings. So it's a very so it's not just from the kind of the moral stance of looking after the welfare of your employees, but also that kind of financial aspect of it as well. Yeah. I've not seen any recent figures, but there's definitely lots of concerns around alcohol and what the outcome, what we're going to be seeing when people come, go back into society a lot more than they are doing currently.
Yeah. Do you feel sort of in that period, could shops or businesses done more to been supportive in terms of in terms of how much alcohol was sold during that period? Do you think the businesses could have maybe done more in terms of protecting people, in terms of, like you mentioned there, obviously some people they were able to, where businesses were able to sort of engage with the staff. I know from our region, quite a lot of people are quite in an industrial sort of jobs where they weren't even in for 6 months. So the likelihood of them being checked in by management or just anyone directors or something was probably very minimal, so they don't know what the welfare of their staff was.
That's a really good point, actually, that you raised, and I'm sure there are kind of things that shops could have done, but it's really difficult, isn't it? Because first of all, it always takes a little while for us to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So we're already months in front before we start getting any kind of figures, which is one of the difficulties. And then I guess it's how do you monitor it? So I guess I could go to the Aldi and get some wine. I suppose they could have limited the amount of wine that people could buy. But I'm not sure how realistic that is and how easy that is to do as well. I think it's a really, really difficult thing to monitor. And I guess, again, that's just about directing people, isn't it, to services. So, if you think that you're drinking too much and if you think that you need some support, let's direct you to get some support around that.
Yeah, I've got kind of a question later on which is going to feed into that, but I'll leave that for a bit later. But one of the things I wanted to just touch on here is, like I've mentioned to you, is about a book called Lost Connections by Johan Hari. I know that you've not maybe read this book yet, but it's about uncovering sort of the real causes of depressions. And one of the quotes from it is about if people don't have friends and don't have supportive partners, your chances of developing depression can increase by up to 75%. Now, obviously, during lockdowns and stuff like that, this was very relevant in terms of loneliness. Is now probably one of the more worrying things, as well as suicide and other things. And I just wondered what your take is in terms of this, of loneliness during that time.
I think it is one of the most difficult things, isn't it, to feel lonely and to be isolated. I think what happened, certainly at the beginning, was there was lots of rallying round. There was a lot of a community spirit.
Yeah, there was.
That was out there. And I think that was just absolutely, that needs applauding. It was just amazing. The amount of people that went out there to try and reach out to their communities in rural areas, in cities, was just absolutely fantastic. And I know the volunteers as well. They were drafting in volunteers from everywhere, and again at huge numbers. I myself volunteered just for a short time, and then things kind of, my job became quite busy because we lost some of the team that we was working with because they were pulled into the COVID, because I work a lot with public health. Yeah. But yeah, so there was a lot around sort of loneliness and isolation. And it's always a really tricky one, isn't it? It's really difficult because we always want to reach out to those that are difficult to engage with. And how do we do that? It becomes a really tough problem sometimes. And I think all we can keep doing is going into our communities. I think volunteers, I think it's just one of the most wonderful things that people can do. And I sincerely mean that. But going out into the communities and keeping those paths of communication open is just helpful. And then, of course, you've got the added problem where perhaps some people that are lonely and isolated don't have technology. So again, How do you get that message across? How do you tell them where they can go to for help, support, companionship? So then we have to go to the next level of putting information leaflets through the door, don't we? So I think it's doing as much as we can. East Riding did that. They had a campaign about sort of looking after your own mental health and well-being, and they've had really positive feedback, but that got posted through every door in the East Riding, so we need to do more of that as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. That there was putting that to door sort of support and stuff like that. And obviously the main thing in terms of loneliness is obviously having that togetherness in terms of support and stuff like that. And now obviously we're in a bit of a more of a position now where we're able to reintegrate, but it might be difficult obviously for people who have probably shielded or spent a lot of time on their own now and having to sort of go from seeing no one to seeing everyone. And it can be quite a difficult sort of just going back sort of full circle and being used to interacting with people again. Is there many things out there now to support people sort of being able to reintegrate into society and communities?
To be honest, that's a question that I'm not really sure of. It's not something that I've been focusing on with my programme, but I'm sure from the amount of emails that we get from Public Health England and NHS England, there is so much going on that right now, to be honest, David, it is so difficult to keep on top of everything. Yeah. So it hasn't really been the focus of the suicide prevention programme. And I'm going to ask you a question in terms of COVID. Have you been at work? Have you been at home working? And how have you found it?
I'll be honest, I've been working throughout the process. I've been working in a school, so for me, I've not had any time off. So for myself, it's been quite normal in terms of work. But obviously, when I come home, it's different in terms of being, say, like, for instance, between that period in January and March, that was probably one of the more challenging times where I wasn't able to go to the gym. I couldn't go see my friends and family again. It became really restricted. That was a period for me where, I'll be honest, was the most difficult, and I lost a bit of motivation and sort of stuff. So, yeah, that's been a period where I found it difficult. But fortunately for me, I've been able to work throughout, and it's not been such a hindrance as such.
Because I think it's been really challenging, and I've certainly faced my own challenges on occasion of working from home with the subject matter that I cover, and sort of 5 days a week I do talk about suicide and suicide prevention, and that can take its toll sometimes. And just like you were saying, really, I didn't have those releases in January to March of being able to go to the gym, and really felt demotivated sometimes. It's really hard, isn't it? Even when you know everything that you should do, it's really hard to keep yourself going at times. And so what was it that kind of got you to carry through? You said that January, March was quite difficult. What did you have in place to help you?
So during January and March, I was part of 2 accountability groups. One was a gym-based group, which was a bunch of friends that we like. Their goal was to lose weight. Mine was to gain weight, which was a perfect time for me because obviously I was doing less exercise, so I achieved what I wanted to. And my other group was basically part of Stay Humble, which was a support group with members of staff and general public, which I put together, basically sharing sort of a check-in every morning to see how people were feeling, and a check-in on an evening. And I carried that through for a number of weeks and months, to just up to the point where the first restriction kind of eased, and I was able to sort of check in and see what people were feeling and supporting them through their toughest days, and trying to sort of use gratitude ideas in terms of the questions I asked, and sort of like, what were your highs, what were your lows, what could you do better? All them sort of stuff were things that I'd tried to implement on that.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I think accountability is really important, isn't it? And having those kind of groups where you are accountable, even if it's for today, you've got to go out for 10 minutes for a walk and then come back and let us know that you've been and done that. I think that accountability, I don't think we can underestimate how powerful that can be. And certainly for me, I did a boot camp. In fact, I did it twice. In fact, I'm on it for the 3rd time because I like the accountability. I've not actually signed up to the boot camp this time, but I'm carrying on with the healthy eating, and I'm at the gym in the morning as well. So I think accountability is a really good way, but just getting out there and getting in the fresh air, even when you don't feel like it, and that's where the accountability comes in, helps you motivate you to do that. And you do feel better, don't you, and feel different.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like since the 2 weeks now that the gyms have been open, I've been able to get up at 6 o'clock every morning knowing that I've got somewhere to go to before work, and have that sort of that release and setting me up for the day has been a blessing, and certainly seen the difference in myself in terms of how I feel.
I'll let you go with the next question.
Sorry, I'll go. So another one from the book, and I don't know your thoughts and statistics. So from the book, it suggests that this is like the last question for the book as well, about depression, and that 37% of it is inherited, and that with severe anxiety, that's between 40 and 40%. Do you believe that it is inherited from family, or in the sort of from the parents?
I mean, there is situations where, where people do, where there's family members do suffer with depression, and it can be sometimes, can't it, that if you've got a family member that's suffering with depression, and they've got really bad depression, and that's a long-standing depression, that can be quite difficult to live with, and I guess for some people that may add to the way that they're feeling and their low mood, and that it might be that they do become depressed after that. But hereditary, I'm not quite sure. I'll leave that to the experts.
Yeah, I think I need to do a bit more research to find out a bit more on that one. But in terms of support, and I've really digged this out of your LinkedIn, if I'm honest, in terms of what you share in your activity and your posts. And I saw that you recently put a video together, was it with Quell Counselling, and that you provide free anonymous counselling. Can you just elaborate a bit more what that is?
Yeah, so we've got this, as you said, it's called Quell, and it's an online mental health service. And it's for men, and it's for men in the Humber Coast Vale area from the age of 18 upwards. And they can just go on to Quell, they just put some details in, it can be anonymous if you want it to be. And it has different components to it. So it has almost like a community feel where you can go in, you can be part of a community, you can share conversations, or it's got things like blogs and things where you might want to go and see how somebody else has dealt with the situation. And then it's also got the counselling service. And I think the counselling service, it runs from 12 lunchtime to 10 p.m. on a night time, and then it's reduced hours on a Saturday and Sunday. But we did some focus groups with men from Humber Coast and Vale and said, would you find this beneficial? And they thought it was a really good way for men to enter. You don't have any queues, you don't have to go to the GP. I think for a counsellor that you're probably waiting 20 to 30 minutes before you get spoken to. And they can signpost you on if they feel that you are in a real crisis and you need the secondary mental health services. So it's just a really good way of men being able to go out there and just talk about their feelings, but also about understanding what they might be going through, because I don't think everybody understands what it might feel like to be anxious, or what does it feel like to be depressed, or what does it feel like to be alcohol dependent, or whatever. So as I use this word a bit like discombobulated. If you're feeling a bit discombobulated and something's not right, then go forward and just speak to somebody and just try and work out what's happening for you.
I think people need to seek counselling. Like I've experienced counselling a few years back. I just felt like a lot of things was happening, and I think it was just I didn't do a lot of sessions in counselling, but just the fact that I had someone to talk to that was someone I didn't know made a huge difference, just to be able to air it really and help me. I think a lot of people just bottle that up instead of just letting it out to someone. Even like you say anonymously is even a great way of doing that.
I think so, and I had quite a few debates with a man actually who felt that we talked a lot about the anonymity, but I just think that it just really helps. We all want people to just come forward and to be able to be honest about how they're feeling. He made some really, really good points, but I just think that there's times in our life where actually, if we can just go in there and just put a username in and get the help and support that we need, if that opens it up to men, then I think it's a really good thing. And the men, I found it extremely moving and powerful, the video. And whether that's because I know that quite a lot of the men on there, and they're people that have had real lived experiences, I just found it really powerful, and I just hope it encourages more men to use it. We also have CUTH in our area as well, and that's for children and young people, and that's for males and females, and that's from that's up to 25. Sorry, that's up to age 25. So if you're a young person and you need help, that is also available to you, but it comes under the word CUTH, and that's KOOTH. And again, they just can go on. I've just signposted a young man to it just this week. And interesting what you said, that there was somebody, a fairly young person, who had expressed that actually it was okay for girls or women to go for counselling, but not for men, not for boys. And I found that really, where does that come from? Where does that bit at a really young age? Where does that come from? Because I'm fairly confident it didn't come from the family members.
I'd say parent. I think it's if I'm honest with you, Joe, it's always been like a dad thing, sort of to just tell them, just to, like, if like something's happened, oh well, just sort of brush it off and forget about it, rather than, like, you know, like say like when they're crying or something, like, oh, boys don't cry. That's the sort of attitude, when really we should be saying, yeah, just let it out, sort of let that emotion out, because that you have them feelings. And I think they're the things that I think it has in the past come from a father figure in terms of how they're brought up, and then it passes on. And that's how I think a lot of that stemmed from, when really it should never have been like that. It should have always been open and honest, and maybe fathers having them conversations with their sons, or, you know, that sort of, that's difficult again if their father's in their life, you know, there's them factors as well. So.
And do you get a feeling that is generally, because I'm assuming that you work with young people, do you get a feeling that that's generally how boys feel about it?
I think it's getting better in schools. In my setting, there is a lot of an emotional learning support. So there's a lot of talks about grief, dealing with all sorts of topics in terms of just like cultures and other things, and it's become a lot more in the setting I work in. I'm not saying that's the same across the board, but I think there's a lot more pushing towards being more open and honest and having them conversations, and I like to think that that's going to be going across the board. It's not just a case of, oh, it's happening at primary school, but at secondary it doesn't happen, or further on. I'm hoping that it's going to happen more elaborate. I mean, one thing does concern me, and this is from years ago, was I was interested in looking and doing counselling, and I was doing it part-time. And one of the concerns was in the East Riding, I was told that there was only a couple of counsellors to do it in the East Riding for all East Riding schools, to do counselling for schools. And that worried me, that there was just a couple across a huge number of schools for support. And that was maybe 2-3 years ago now. I don't know if that's the same.
Really changing. No, yeah. I think things are really changing. So they're going to be having mental health support teams in schools. Yeah. And I know that I'm not quite so sure about the East Riding, if I'm really honest, just because I haven't had that conversation with one of the other leads. But definitely Hull are starting that, and I know they've got it on the South Bank in northeast Lincolnshire. That's already been set up. So that's really good. As my dog just jumps on the bed.
Yeah, it's all right, don't worry. My dog's made an appearance on radio before, don't worry.
I was on the Bernsey show the other week, and she started barking. Somebody had come and done a delivery, and she doesn't bark very often. But you could, I was just, yeah. I went a bit red. I didn't know what to do. He was really cool about it, actually. But I thought, she just sits by me all day like this. So she's really good normally, but she just had this frenzy of barking while I was on the Bernsey show. It wasn't great.
And in terms of like that video, has there's another link I wanted to talk about, and it's something I've done as well as the training in terms of the talksuicide.co.uk, and I think this is something that everyone should be giving 20-30 minutes to. Just, you know, that is all it takes to complete, but it could help someone deal with a situation where they might have to talk someone out of that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to talk about that. Did you say that you completed the training?
Yeah, I did it during 2 weeks ago, I think it was. Yeah, I've done it. So.
I ask you what you what did you think of it, and what was your biggest what was the thing that you came away with?
Just knowing that you can help people in that situation, and just to think about like just them sort of just the right way of going about it, really, and just being confident about it.
I think it is absolutely fantastic training, and I think one thing that it really does do is dispel that myth about talking about suicide. So by talking about suicide, you're not going to encourage somebody to start thinking about it and take their own life, which is one of the biggest myths that we have out there, really. And I think it goes through various stages, doesn't it? It goes through different scenarios that you can look at, and so maybe perhaps one of those you can relate to, but it helps you look at different behaviours that people might be portraying, and so you might now think, ooh, my mate who I've just been to the gym with, he just wasn't himself tonight. There was just something different about him. And actually now I'm putting the jigsaw together. He's been a bit quiet over the last couple of weeks. He seems a bit withdrawn. I'm going to have a conversation with him. And, that doesn't mean to say that you're going to launch straight into, are you suicidal? But it's about being able to approach it, isn't it, in a very sort of sensitive way, and to be able to listen to them. But then to talk about suicide, to speak openly about it. And I'm with you, David. I think if everybody over 16 could take that training, the amount of people, we can't underestimate the amount of people that have said that it's really helpful. And even those that have perhaps lost somebody to suicide, that have taken the training and come back and said, I wish I'd have seen this before, because I might have been able to do something different. Sometimes we just don't ever see the signs, so I'm not putting that out as a that they could have changed it, but that's what they say to me, is that perhaps something different could have come out of that. And I think it just opens up that conversation, really, of talking about suicide in an open and honest way, because the relief that people often feel when you talk about it can be quite immense. And it must feel so scary to people. I forget sometimes that I've worked in mental health for such a long time, but it can be just having a conversation. And if somebody told you the problems without saying the word suicide, you were probably willing to sit there and listen to it, wouldn't you? And to support them and say, okay, we can get through this. It's just the same with suicide as well, when that's entered into the conversation. And there's, it might be that you have to get in touch with the emergency services, but it might be that you just need to sit there and listen and have a coffee and just have an hour, 2 hours with that individual. So yeah, please take the training.
Yeah, and I will be putting them in. I'll be definitely putting obviously that in the podcast notes, and obviously the link to the video as well for the counselling. I'll be certainly putting them across. And one thing, this is kind of something I actually heard today, strangely enough, but in terms of men that seem to have lower testosterone leads to depression. I just wondered if you, in terms of programs for men, and one of the things that I've heard as advice to help men during depression is to go lift weights. And I wondered if there's any sort of programs or encouragement in terms to encourage that sort of thing, because obviously going from lifting weights, then that can obviously lead to setting goals and then being able to achieve things by obviously using that sort of changing the mindset in terms of the depression, having a goal, lifting weights, obviously changing their body, then it makes them think that actually, what else can I do with my goals? Can I go in terms of a job? Can I get a house? Can I do this? All these sort of things could potentially happen if we have the right things in place.
Yeah, great question, great advice, and I'm going to ask you. I'm going to put you on the spot 1 second again. David, I think you should come and join our men's task and finish group. I think you should be involved in that. So I'm going to call you out and say, would you become a member of our task and finish group? We meet once a month, but we look at all these kind of things. So have a think about it and get back to me.
Yeah, definitely have a look at that.
So in terms of programs, yes, there's lots of programs out there. We have been working with Hull FC, Hull City of Boxing, working with Grimsby Town, working with York Knights, work with York Mindfulness, I'm just in discussions now with Hull KR, Hull City. So all of the programs that they've got about engaging with men in sport and in an activity, but also having that time at the end to be able to talk as well. So it'll be a lot of these groups that we're kind of commissioning will be centered around an activity, whatever that might be. Like there's men in sheds as well. So there's all different forms, and we're trying to really get them out there right across Humber Coast Vale. So you go do an activity, but at the end, you have some talking time. You've got time to have a coffee, and you've just got time to raise any kind of concerns that you might have, and to learn a little bit more about mental health and wellbeing. So yes, we've got several programs that span the Humber Coast and Vale that we've commissioned from our program to deliver that.
That's awesome to hear, like so many community clubs and sort of professional outfits wanting to support in terms of, with men and stuff like that. Do you feel obviously the 12 months since with COVID and obviously it's shined a light on how important health is, that's obviously pushed that forward in terms of people realising now, right, I need to do something with my life. I've been too sedentary.
Yeah, I think it probably has, because we were talking about this. I was actually interviewed yesterday with Mike Smith and Gary Sainty from Hull KR, and we talked about that. And I don't know whether you've noticed, but certainly I've noticed a lot more people being active, because we didn't have anything else to do, did we? So the people out there on the streets that have taken up running, that have taken up cycling, that have taken up walking, it's been massive. So I think, the last 12 months, I hope it continues. And I think a lot of gyms have put things on, haven't they, for people? So we've been able to do boot camps, we've been able to do exercise at home. There was Joe Wicks. How inspiring was he? He got whole families, working out in the home. So I think hopefully for a lot of people that will continue, but I think it has inspired a lot of people to get motivated and getting active again.
I was going to say there should be people queuing out the door for running clubs. The amount of people I see running down from my street, obviously he's still running, so I'm not surprised. Obviously, everyone seems to have really took to this sort of outdoor exercise since that. And I also wanted to congratulate you as well in terms of receiving the High Sheriff Award for work towards suicide prevention. How did you feel upon receiving this award?
Thank you very much. I felt really proud, if I'm honest, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's not just me. There's a lot of people that work with us. We've got Carol Lavelle, who's somebody with lived experiences, who's our chairperson, and I work closely with public health leads, with the CUTH Trust, with mental health organisations, with the police. And the voluntary sector have just been amazing, and the grassroots. So felt really proud that the work had been recognised. And I suppose the real pride in it was actually because they've seen the work. It's getting out there now that the people are talking about it a little bit more. It's taken us 2 years, but the fact that people are talking about it was how we came to get the award. So that can only be a good thing, can't it?
Yeah, it can, and like I say, congratulations on that. And I've just got a couple of final questions for you. And the first one is, what does it mean to be human?
What does it mean to be human? Wow. Okay. So for me, being a human is, do you mean it in terms of like being kind, those kind of things? Is that what you're asking me? What do I like? Do I like about humans?
Yeah, it's I think so. My example of being human is about being a social animal. So it's from Aristotle. So that we need each other, we must be there for each other, we must take care of each other. To pretend otherwise is to violate our nature, to be more or less than what it means to be a human being.
Exactly that. That was put beautifully. I think that's a really good way of saying what a human is. And I think as humans, we really need to be more thoughtful about the way that we interact with other humans, and really believe in this kindness, because, people flip this kindness around. But actually, a can be very unkind in the next sentence. So for me, being human, being compassionate, being empathic, and being kind to our fellow humans in the way that we want to be treated, I think is something that was driven into me as a youngster, and is something that I stand by and still really believe in now.
Yeah, that certainly has come to light a lot more, obviously, in the last sort of 12 months, was that sort of message, unfortunately, in terms of a celebrity death and stuff. So I think being kind is certainly something that we should always be towards each other. And finally, I'd like to ask is, what makes you stay humble?
Oh gosh, I'm just so thankful for so many things. And in terms of my role, every day I go out there and I meet people that are genuine and want to give. You know, it doesn't matter what they've been through. These may be the people that have actually lost somebody to suicide or in really difficult circumstances, and all they want to do is give. And I've worked for, health and social care for 34 years now, but this last 2 years, I think, has just, I don't know, I just feel pride, I feel humble to be amongst people that just want to give all the time and to make things right for other people. That's the bit that makes me feel humble.
I think you're doing a great job, and I'm sure that you'll continue to do that, Jo. And I just want to thank you for giving me your time on a Friday to record this at the end of a work day. And I just hope that this sort of podcast helps people in terms of it'll help someone who might be struggling right now. It might help someone accrue new ideas in terms of like the resources we've shared and stuff like that. So I'd like to just thank you for giving me your time, and obviously. Where can people look at anything that they need to sort of look up for in terms of Humber prevention, the prevention websites or?
Yep. So there's they can go to www.talksuicide.co.uk, and on there we actually have a Geomap. So again, it covers the Humber Coast and Vale area, but there's all sorts of different services that people can tap into. So if you just put where you're from, so if you're from Hull, there'll be a different, there's lots of different services, and we're building that every day. So if people have a service that we don't know about, give us a shout too. And David, can I thank you as well for all the work that you're doing?
No problem. Thank you for giving me your time. So thank you for staying humble, Jo.